That works. Thank you all for being here today.
They know what they do.
I know that you are not here to see me. Yeah. And so my aim is to be brief, to be bright, and to be gone, and for us to get into the dialogue that we're here to engage. I'm Elon Dancy. I have the pleasure of serving as the Helen S. Faison Professor and Director of the Center for Urban Education at the University of Pittsburgh. Known to many as Q, our vision is to create spaces of learning and sharing with communities to transform educational opportunities and experiences. One of the ways we try to create those transformative experiences is through monthly Lunch and Learn dialogues. It's my pleasure to welcome you to November's Lunch and Learn, Black Women, Black Feminism, Learning from the Intersections. Before I introduce our panelists, I want to offer thoughts on the significance of today's conversation. First, it's important to remember that we gather amid neighborhoods that echo the stories of African survival and buildings that keep the secrets of the Underground Railroad, a context forged through the political, economic, and life plunder of a Black state. We gather at a university and remember that human slavery, writes Craig Stephen Wilder, was the precondition for the rise of higher education in the Americas. And we gather to confront various ways the horrors of enslavement recompose and reenact themselves in the forms of American schools and schooling. We gather today on the land placed by its creator in the care and protection of several native tribes that camped and moved through what is known as Pittsburgh. We gather on land originally shared by many indigenous nations as a place of gathering and exchange. We gather in memory of Helen S. Faison, the first Black person and woman to serve in the fraught position of superintendent of Pittsburgh Public Schools. She was one of the first Black teachers in Pittsburgh, hired in 1950 to teach social studies and English at Fifth Avenue High School, and the first Black high school guidance counselor in the Pittsburgh Public School District. Indeed, in her legacy of being many firsts, we clearly see the ways that U.S. institutions propagandize an American dream on the backs of Black populations, particularly Black women. We marvel at Dr. Faison's steadfastness, to quote Dr. Cynthia Dillard, as indeed hers was a resilience against the odds. We gather around the Pitt Center for Urban Education theme, which this year organizes its activities under the idea of witnessing, rigor, resistance, and responsibility. With this theme, we honor the importance of the testimony, of speaking the truth of our lived experiences with injustice over time. We ask, what does it mean to witness? How can we learn from the unheard, unseen stories of writers, thinkers, and autobiographers past? How can we learn from the examples of Ida B. Wells Barnett, Fannie Lou Hamer, and James Baldwin? And we recall that some of our greatest witnesses of injustice have been Black women and Black feminists. So in many ways, our engagement with notions of witnessing have also required a deep meditation on Black women's experiences and the values, principles, and liberating truths within Black feminism. How is witnessing a form of resistance? What are our responsibilities as witnesses and to witnesses? How are research, teaching, and service acts of bearing witness? As we acknowledge that divisive times are not new, what is revealed to us about work undone and possibilities for educational futures? We ask that you reimagine policies, practices, and politics in education systems, and how this ultimately requires remaking the world. In the words of June Jordan's essay, following Anita Hill's testimony against Clarence Thomas, can I get a witness? We gather to hear our brilliant panelists, including Dr. Cynthia Dillard, who is Nana Mansa II of Mpiazum, Ghana. Did I pronounce that?
You did.
Mpiazum, Ghana in West Africa. She is the Mary Frances Early Professor and Teacher of Education and Department Chair in the Department of Educational Theory and Practice at the University of Georgia. Dr. Kirsten T. Edwards is Associate Professor and Associate Chair of the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies Department at the University of Oklahoma. Dr. Venus Evans Winters is Professor of Education at Illinois State University, a psychotherapist and a certified clinical trauma professional. Dr. Olga Welch is the former Dean of the School of Education at Duquesne University and also the first Black woman to hold the post.
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Ciora Thomas is the founder and executive director of Sisters Pittsburgh, a transgender-centered drop-in space, resource provider, and shelter transitioning program based in Pittsburgh. She is also commissioner for the Pennsylvania Commission on LGBTQ Affairs. Please give our panelists a warm round of applause. Finally, it is my pleasure to welcome our moderator, a prominent researcher and professor who is the first Black person and woman to serve as the Renée and Richard Goldman Dean of the School of Education at the University of Pittsburgh. The Center for Urban Education is grateful for her thoughtful and courageous leadership, her mind and her poetics, and her commitment to equity and justice as a cultural driver in the School of Education. Please welcome our moderator for this afternoon, Dr. Valerie Kinloch.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm not sure, Dr. Dancy, if you introduced our youngest panelist.
Oh, I didn't. Welcome.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Shantae Buchanan.
Hi, Shantae.
And Shantae attends what school?
Martin Luther King.
Very, very lovely to have you. So let me just start by saying this is the highlight of my entire year. and I think we have a lot of great highlights in the School of Education, but for me to have an opportunity to moderate a panel with such brilliance and Blackness and beauty, I'm just telling you, this is just phenomenal. And so I'm sort of like, my hormones and my emotions are kind of like all off the roof, because it is not every day that a dean of a School of Education has an opportunity to talk about Black women and Blackness with a group of folks who I absolutely admire, even if you don't know it. So I just want to start there. So thank you for being here. And before we turn it over to some conversations and discussions, you know, I would not be Valerie, your dean, if I did not start with the mission vision of our School of Education. So if you can bear with me. We ignite learning. We strive for well-being for all. We teach. We commit to student, family, and community success. We commit to educational equity. We advocate. We work for justice. We cultivate relationships. We forge engaged partnerships. We collaborate. We learn with and from communities. We innovate and we agitate. We pursue and produce knowledge. We research. We disrupt and transform inequitable educational structures. We approach learning as intertwined with health, wellness, and human development. We address how national, global, social, and technological change impacts learning. We shape practice and policy. We teach with and for dignity. We think, we dream, we lead. We are the School of Education here at the University of Pittsburgh.
Yes.
I see that sort of side eye you just gave me, Dr. Venus. I love it. I love it.
I'm working on this.
No, don't work on it. It was all love. Oh, it was love. It was love. I saw it, but it was sort of a, and it gave me a look like you might want to join us here at the University of Pittsburgh School of Education. So I'm going to behave and I'm going to get started. And we're going to talk later, Dr. Venus.
That's right. No, that's right.
I want to start the conversation with our panelists first by asking us to just put in the space and in the room the names, the lives of Black women, whether they're still with us or gone. And so let's actually start there. Black women who come to your mind. Black women and Black girls. So the names of them, if we can just fill this room with that, and then we can get started. And feel free just to name out and call out.
Marion Dillard.
Charlotte Extra.
Tatiana Jefferson.
Mary Frances Hurley.
Anna Julia Cooper.
September P. Clark.
Fannie Lou Hamer.
Barbara Christensen.
Yes.
Yes.
We're going to move on from that point and the names of those who we don't know.
Yes.
All right. Let me actually start by just posing a few open questions. And I'm going to pose a few open questions to our panelists and our guests. And then I'm going to move into having questions for each person. And then after we do that, we're also going to have some interactions from the audience. All right? So again, it is so great to see so many of you. Some of you, many of you whom I know, and others who I hope to get to know. So I want to start by posing the question about Black women and Black feminism. What is Black feminism, and why is it important today?
Dr. Dillard, I am exerting my,
Senior privilege?
well, no, I wouldn't go quite that far. But we engaged in a very lively conversation with the Heinz Fellows.
We did.
Around, and they had very thoughtful questions, and this panel responded. And so I want to start because you talked about how you came to define yourself. And I also want to invite my other panelist, because she talked about why she didn't identify. And our third panelist talked about why she felt locked out of the feminism. And our fourth panelist talked about how she came to redefine Black feminism to fit into the paradigms of resistance that she engaged in. So I'm just, that's why
All
I
of
started.
that.
All of that.
So I thanks. So for me, Black feminism has always been, do you need us to stand? Is that what you're motioning? Oh, wait, you need to hear me? So, can you hear me now? Okay. Just so you all know, this is what's coming up. So for me, Black feminism is an approach. It's a way of standing in a particular set of experiences that allows us to very carefully look at and use the intersections of our being to make sense of the world, to approach and deal with structures that don't honor us, and to move particular initiatives forward, if you will. So the conversation we were having earlier is about this contrast between Black feminism and womanism. And what I was saying is, you can call me whatever you'd like. Black feminist, Black womanist, Cynthia Dillard, but you will know me by my work. And work that is Black feminist in nature is work that attends to Black people. It attends to brown people. It attends to people bringing the fullness of who they are into the space. And so that's, for me, I don't attend as much to the naming as I do to the work. So I will know a Black feminist, or I will know an endarkened feminist by the work that he or she does.
Does anyone else want to add it?
So I'm actually going to diverge a bit, Dr. Welch, from what I said, and I may pick up, Gina raising the roof back there. Oh, I can't. Okay. Ooh, child. I never quite learned my outside voice. So I'm going to diverge a bit, and maybe I'll pick up a little bit from what I said during the Heinz Fellow conversation. But to go to Dr. Kinloch's question, why do we still need Black feminism, or Black women's studies? I would argue that, and I've been actually mulling around that question since I got it. I would argue that Black feminism, Black women's studies still continues to offer us the most rigorous analytic of power that we have. So Derrida didn't do it for us. Foucault didn't do it for us. Marx didn't do it for us. Black feminist scholarship does it for us. And it continues to evolve and do it for us. It gives us the most, what I would argue, the most powerful, most rigorous, scholarly, intellectual analytic of power across multiple domains, across multiple planes of reference, planes of identity, planes of knowing and being in the world. And so that's why we still need Black feminists, because ain't nobody else doing it like Black feminists are doing it. Connected to, and deal with the work, as Dr. Dillard says, Black feminist scholarship dealing with the work of liberation. I just have not encountered a theoretical tradition that deals with the work of liberation in the ways that Black feminist and Black womanist scholarship, or Black women's studies broadly does. Yes, as was mentioned earlier, I do not identify as a Black feminist. I identify as a womanist. That's complicated and it's over here and over there, and it has all kinds of reasons, but I'm not gonna hold any more time. We can maybe pick up on that conversation later.
Can everyone hear me? We're good? Awesome. So I discussed, when we talked about Black feminism, my journey these past 10 years, maybe, in trying to be in a space of sisterhood and fellowship within feminism, and how even within those feminist circles, there were phobias that existed within those circles. There were toxicities that existed within those circles, and trying to unpack those toxicities within toxic femininity. So when we are discussing these things and being intentional about it, we have to look at that as well. That has to be a conversation, as hard as it may be, but a conversation that we have to continue to have to be a Black and brown community as a whole. Mm-hmm. If we're not having these conversations, we will never stand on the same platform. We will always be in different intersections that don't even meet within an intersection. Mm-hmm. We're going to be roads that go off of the road. We're going to be exits. Mm-hmm. We're not going to be the end location where we all meet together. So that was a big thing for me. I know throughout my years, and I'm born and raised from Pittsburgh, my activism has, of course, centered around Black and brown trans women and girls, and ensuring that if it doesn't have to be feminism. Yeah. We do not have to fit in that social construct, because it's what it is. It's a social construct. If we're not welcome there. Mm-hmm. We have the power, the strength to create our own spaces, foundations, that can also meet at that end location. So if we keep becoming I don't even know how to put that. What's coming to my head is how, even within Black feminism, how that has also stood on the backs of Black trans women. Mm-hmm. And how that has not been a conversation that Black trans women have actually been doing very, very, very important work forever. That's in our Black history. Mm-hmm. Our Black history we didn't get to learn in Pittsburgh or schools in general. So making it a point as a Black person to actually educate yourself on these different intersections, so that we can have a common car to meet at that in location. So
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't answer that question earlier.
I know you did.
Did you see me avoid it?
Yes,
You threw it back at me.
That's why
If you ever want to start a social media fight, start talking about Black feminism. Yes. I lost white women who thought that I was so gender friendly, right? Or you know, they could talk to me about race. They didn't want to talk about feminism. They wanted to talk about education. They didn't want to talk about Black women's rights and power. And and you want to talk about the Pan-African men folk, like what she say? Because you know they love me that I go hard in the paint when it comes to racial liberation, you know. And if you ever want to lose Black women, say Black feminism or Black feminists as opposed to African feminism, African womanism, or womanism. So usually I ask what's in the name. And so my meditation today started with be true to yourself. So when you talk about feminism, I don't know if the naming is important or not important, to be honest with you, right? I used to have this little thing I used to say, well, you can call me Venus, you can call me VV. Sometimes they even call me Dr. V. It doesn't really matter too much to me as long as they don't call me no goddamn B. You see what I'm saying? So depending on who your audience is, they're going to name you for yourself anyway. So when I think back, I started the conversation out earlier with my grandmother. See, what we're doing with this feminism discussion, Black feminism, we're always juxtaposing ourselves to white women. Yes. how you gonna talk about how you gonna compare the originals to the carbon copies? Yes. So that's the reason why I asked Shantae. Shantae is here she goes to school locally. And her muse back there, I'm not really a big fan of Mentor, but her muse, can you raise your hand so we can know who to give credit to, who she going home with? I want to start that media, rumor either. Like, she got another kid, Joe. Right? I would love you. She is my daughter. I needed her here because I needed to see her and feel her and remember why I stay in this. I don't always want to be here. And so even when Dean Kinloch, my sister, oh my God, I remember reading her dissertation. I said, this is what I've been waiting for. I looked at it because I'm working on my face, y'all. I'm really working on it. And I just look like we're tied to these institutions even when we don't necessarily want to be a part of the institution. So I needed Shantae here to ground me so I can be true to myself. Black feminism, it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy. It's just the way our ponderings about the social world and how we navigate the social world. Black feminism is also a proxy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that proxy. Sometimes that proxy means blowing stuff up from the inside out. Yes. Sometimes it means meeting black girls where they're at. Right. That proxy shifts whether I'm talking to doc students, whether I'm talking to white administrators, or if I'm talking to K-12 girls, or if I'm talking to my boys' youth group. Because the boys said, hey, I want some of what they getting. Right? So from a Pan-African and Afrocentric perspective, remember, we see sexuality and gender across a spectrum. It's not the singularity identity. And that's what we're going wrong at, because many of us are educated on feminism from a white, liberal, educated woman's lens. Yes. They're dominating education right now. I don't care how you define it or how you want to explain it away. It's my reality. It's her reality. Yeah. Yes. Y'all see where I'm coming from? Okay? It's so true to yourself. Black feminism is also an epistemology. It's about our knowledge pursuits. How do we know what we know? Sometimes I know what I know because my grandmother showed me what a feminist lives like. She will cut you or shoot you if you did anything to her babies or those who she loves. Man or female, black or white. You see what I'm saying? So that's how I know what I know when see Sashay with all her hips in the kitchen. I'm not giving up my femininity. I'm just now reclaiming it. When you grew up on the south side of Chicago, you learn how to navigate that street corner, that bus stop. Men and women and girls, pimps and ministers. You see what I'm saying? By sort of bringing yourself in, you can't necessarily even hold on to that femininity because that could be life or death. So even that's a space of power and privilege. So for me, for example, I love Black Girl Magic. Some of y'all have heard me use that hashtag. But you know what we really need to be talking about for Shantae? We need to be talking about Black girl power. We need some power. Okay? Black feminism. I usually have an S at the end. Black feminisms. It's also an ontology. It's an ontology. Sometimes we cannot put that into words. Sometimes I can't write it. I don't care how many articles, scientific journal articles I've written. I don't care how many times I've written books, right? Somebody spoke earlier about the podcast. I can't always articulate it. It's a way of being in the world. Now, white people did not invent writing. But the way that it's been stolen and recycled and articulated in our school systems, right? It's not necessarily what we are or who we are. As y'all can hear, I've switched in so many languages right now. I'm doing this Black woman thing where we all can look at each other. This is backed up by linguistics, by the way. They studied African people on the continent of Africa and across the diaspora. There's this thing that we do. She didn't have to say a word. They found out that wherever we're clicking at in our mouths, in the back of our throats, it has different meanings. How do you write that? So something is lost in translation when I'm writing with or about Shantae. Even if I'm forced to speak in the colonizer's language, something is lost. My tongue is defying me now because I'm getting emotional. And it wants to do this thing that I would probably lose some of y'all. Or y'all would assume I'm uneducated. But as I told them before, earlier, I've been in school since Head Start. I want to say pre-K, y'all, but
You've been
now,
in school since you actually were born into your mother.
Oh, exactly, before. You know what I'm saying? Head Start. Sometimes I'll be false flagging. Excuse my gang language. Sometimes I'll be false flagging and saying pre-K. It wasn't pre-K. It was Head Start.
This child.
Now you always sound but I said this. I want us to have some front porch talk. Yes. Front porch talk requires us to be in different positions. I might be between somebody's legs getting my hair did. Or I might be the girl down there playing school on the bottom of the porch. Or I might be the little girl that's sitting there. I got to sit there with the other kids because I was acting the fool and grandma and them still on the porch and I got to act like I'm not listening to them when I really am. That's an ontology. Yeah. That's literacy. That's learning. Right? So that's what we're talking. Let me tell you something. Black feminism is also about epistemic apartheid. Interrupted. Who are we citing? Who are we writing about? Whose names are we raising up when we speak about academic knowledge and education and schooling and socialization?
So then that's the program. I'm see y'all later. I'm just sitting here like, yes, all of that, Dr. all of that. You know what? Let me back up and I need some love. You just gave me life all over again.
I needed that energy. I need to transfer that energy.
No, it's all good. It's all good. And I hate to be the one to try to keep us moving, but I want to actually pick up where you actually left off, and I want to actually turn this question over to you all. You said we're talking about Black feminism. We should be talking about feminisms, Black feminisms. But then you also said that what we really should be talking about is Black girl and Black woman power. And if we're actually going to talk about Black girl and Black woman power, then I want to actually jump all the way back to you, Dillard, just for a second. Okay. So it is on spiritual striving. And we went to Ghana about 9 years ago.
Yeah, we did.
And it was about this darkened feminist epistemology. So my question for you is, as I'm thinking about Ghana and the experience that you led when we were there, how do we take what Dr. Venus is saying in reference to a framework that looks at Black girl and Black woman power, and we think about it from that theoretical, methodological perspective of Black and darkened feminists? What does that look like?
So first, look, Ghana was never the same once we left. Just so you know. But two things it feels like to me, at least two, have to happen. One is that we, and part of what I see happening with groups that I do take to Ghana, is that folks recognize that we have a history that didn't start on these shores. And that history can inform how we think. That history should inform how we think. It should inform how we teach, what curriculum looks like. That is a people who had a humanity long before we came here in inhumane conditions. And so part of it for me feels like a need to understand what our true histories are. How did we get here? Why are there such people called African Americans, Afro-Canadians, Afro-Caribbeans, Afro-Puerto Ricans? That's not accidental. That's a result of something, right? A tragic, horrifying Holocaust, right? Which shifted not just what happened here on this side of the water, but on that side of the water as well. So it feels like to me, one thing that would have to happen is a reformulation of history and an understanding of history that doesn't start on these shores in shackles and chains. Second thing it feels like to me, if we're going to talk about black girl power, is that we have to lay that against a black backdrop. So while we exist in a space of whiteness for the most part, in most of our institutions, in most of this society, we've somehow got to put the curriculum for black girls and black women and others against a black backdrop. We're always talking about what we're not instead of talking about what we are. And unless we have an accurate sense of history, it will be difficult to do that. So those two things I think would have to happen. Of course, I would advocate that all of us do a Harriet Tubman moment and take ourselves right on back to the continent, at least to learn the things we would need to know in order to be able to do the kind of work that I'm advocating for.
Could I add something to what you just said? You said histories. In my work, I always go back to come forward. So yes, I remember the history of feminists who were not called feminists, like Sojourner Truth, whom I referenced earlier. But I also think in terms of our life stories. And so I'm going to give you one to give you a context for that. I came from a very privileged background, and I'll just let it go there. And my grandfather and grandmother started churches in Salisbury, North Carolina. He was an ordained Lutheran pastor from Concordia Seminary. And when they wanted to converse around the dinner table with their 5 children and they didn't want their children to know what they were saying, they switched to German and then came back. My grandmother was in one of those businesses when a black woman came in and said, "Mrs. Latch, I need to talk to you right away. I was at a lunch and they're talking about lynching my twins and I need help because they've been falsely accused of rape." And my grandmother and grandfather, who had a lot to lose, my grandmother told her, "Bring your sons, wait, first of all, don't go home. Have your sons brought to my house early, before it gets dark, and drop them there." She said, "All right," and she said, "Believe me, I'll take care of it." She said, "But they got to appear in court tomorrow." She said, "I will take care of that, just bring them." That's exactly what happened. She didn't go home. The white supremacists and Ku Klux Klan showed up to lynch her sons. They were hidden in my grandmother's basement. The next morning, she took them to court, but she took them dressed alike. And the white woman who had accused them couldn't pick out the right twin. We were activists before the term activists. Yes. We acted sometimes against our own self-interest because my grandparents could have lost everything. But they said, no. We are members of the community. We are not outside. We're outside on the inside, but we're inside on the outside too. So I would add to what you said, that to understand the role of black feminism, you must understand the role of history, you must understand who you are and where you are, and you must above all understand your context, because context often dictate behaviors. And that would be my definition.
So before we move on, I need to just jump to you and stay with you for a minute, Dr. Olga. So if we are to understand our histories and context, and we are actually to try to survive and thrive in this particular type of context, so help me understand and help everyone understand, how did you enter a predominantly white institution as the first dean, black woman dean, at a university here, and how did you actually understand that you were taking in all the history and you needed to survive and thrive with and for other people? Give me some strategies, because, this is my 3rd year here.
Okay. First of all, I continue to study leadership, because the more I know, the less I know. It's a conundrum wrapped in an enigma. So one of the things that I think you need to understand is that you don't know what you don't know. And so part of learning what you don't know is to learn the history of the institution in which you find yourself. In my case, Duquesne is a 140-year-old Roman Catholic institution on a bluff in Pittsburgh. Does not interact very often with everybody else. Okay? So the very first thing I had to do was to learn how Pittsburgh saw Duquesne. So I walked the streets of Pittsburgh, but didn't tell them I was a dean. I just said, what's that school up there on that hill? What's that called? Duquesne? They said, that's not Duquesne. That's Duquesne. I said, oh, I'm sorry, what is Duquesne known for? Oh, well, they do good works. They do a lot of good works. I said, oh, really? What kind of good work? Well, I think they have a law school, and I think they, and blah, blah, blah. What do you think about the school of education? Oh, the good works. They do good work. They produce some good, I think they produce some good teachers. I said, okay. I read the text about Duquesne. I read the text by walking the text of Pittsburgh. So I learned about the bridges and why they exist. I learned why people want to know where you come from before they want to know what about you or what you're doing. I want to know why they sit in that stadium and yell for the Steelers, but then go back to, no, I don't go on the north side. I don't know nothing about the south side. I don't do that. All right. I learned the text. So learn your context. I mean, really learn it. Yes. All right. Listen to people that you don't normally come in contact with. I didn't just talk to academics. I talked to people. I talked to the people on the streets that were not academics. Went into places where I needed to know and recognize from my own heritage that to be the first, you must also be the last. Which means for me, there are people in my context who saw servant leadership as me being the servant that led to their agendas. For me, being a servant leader is to make yourself accountable for all. That means you hold yourself accountable first, right. Which means I continue to educate myself throughout my 13-year tenure as Dean of the School of Education at Duquesne. I'm not interested in bashing institutions. I'm not interested in bashing people. I'm interested in evolving and transformative change. That's.
So let me just quickly add here, because I don't want us to miss this moment. So Dr. Olga Welch was the first Black woman dean at the predominantly white institution called Duquesne University, first Black woman dean there. And I want to also say that your most recent book is titled Truth Without Tears, and it provides a really, really important blueprint for not just thinking about leadership, but thinking about having a sense of being and being in spaces, navigating those spaces, but also being real and true to who you are. So I want to acknowledge you and all the work that you've done, and I want to also acknowledge the work that you continue to do.
Could I just add one more thing?
Please.
The co-author on the book is the first African-American female dean at the University of Tennessee as a vice provost of the dean of the Graduate School of Education, and was just inducted into the African-American Hall of Fame this past Saturday as among the first. I just want you to know, I like to hang out with folk like this. I like being around smart folk, and I like to learn from them. And the pronoun that I just don't like, and I meant to say this when you asked me how it's about, the pronoun I least like is I. The pronoun I most love is we. Thank you.
Dr. Ciora.
So I just wanted to add, and because us talking, we talk so very binary in language. And Dr. Olga, we had a conversation in the middle, and as a leader, here is my duty to teach. And where I'm going towards is our language when we talk. When we speak in a colonial binary language, that may erase someone in the room. I identify as a woman, so I have no problem with that, but we don't know who else is in the room. So I always want to make sure that we are all also acknowledging others, if that's they, them pronouns, or whatever they identify with, that they are always acknowledged and not erased within the binary. So.
Thank you.
And I want to stick here because I think it's also important to put in the space that you are, and you've been described by Pittsburgh City Paper as a trailblazer, an activist, a former sex worker, a trans woman who's on a mission to create safe and welcoming spaces for fellow trans people and fellow people of color, and I'm still quoting, in a city where you have often felt unsafe and unwelcome. And this is the first time I think you and I are meeting. You are an amazing human being. I have read about you. I have studied you. And I just think that the world is a better place because you are here. And yet, we have this study that came out recently about gender and race in Pittsburgh. So help me understand how you feel about living in Pittsburgh and doing the work that you're doing here.
So, living in Pittsburgh, growing up in Pittsburgh, unfortunately, I was not provided the education on what I would move forward to be later in life. I was not provided that education. There was no other identities, spaces that affirmed folk like me. And even my own black people. Let's just keep it real. Even within black neighborhoods, that was not okay. I could get hurt in my own neighborhoods. So it was intentional for me to create spaces where young black trans girls, black trans boys can exist. Because we're coming from our black mothers. And a lot of our black mothers were not connecting those two. That you're having black trans kids. And to love them authentically. My mother failed at that. But with education, dedication, time, my mom's my biggest ally. Every woman in my life is my biggest ally. Every man in my life, every gender nonconforming person in my life is my biggest ally. Living here was always combative. So many fights, so many people who would smile in my face but still be transphobic behind my back. I don't give a shit about that now. I'm 31 years old. So if you want to be that way behind my back, be that way. But if you feel as though that you want to have an unpacking conversation about why you feel that way, I'm also open to that. That's leadership. Yeah. It was never about being in a space of I. It was about being in a space of we. Because I understood that I was not the only one. We have communities of trans people of color in Pittsburgh that are homeless. Kids that come to my organization and need resources that they should be being provided at home. So that was the intent, to make sure that these black and brown kids who were a part of a different intersection that their parents did not understand had a place. And then that did not make me hate our parents anymore. It helped me to help educate them. To understand what I talked about earlier is how white supremacy has kept that education away from black and brown communities. White people know about trans people. They've been knowing about trans people. How come black people don't? Why do we sit in a space of not knowing, and we can go to college, have these conversations, become academics, but we don't understand the gender diaspora of black people? And that we have an array of gender identities within our black communities. It comes from the motherland. This wasn't an accident.
I'm sitting here like, yes, because this is not our education.
Right.
It is a part of our education. It came from
Part
us.
of our history, right?
And so oftentimes people who want to travel, they're like, I'm not going to Ghana, I'm not. They're transphobic, they're homophobic. And I'm thinking, no,
They're not.
Actually, there's a spectrum that's allowed in a way, that exists in a way,
Right.
that it never has existed here.
Right. And historically,
Thank you for that reminder.
Historically, trans people were omens,
Exactly.
medicine
Spiritual
givers,
people.
spiritual people.
Yep.
The communities came to us for information and
Yeah.
education and to read the future.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
So, but that's because of bias and phobias is something that our own communities have not dipped into to understand. It is something that our school system has failed to teach students and children because of a fear that my trans body is going to rub off on another person. And that's not the truth. Education is the most powerful thing that we can give our kids. And if we're not educating our kids about everything black, we're doing a disservice to our kids. We're going to be raising homophobes, transphobes, all of those things, if we're not being authentically truthful about education, no matter your bias as an adult. Adults raise transphobes and homophobes because of their own bias. So how are we breaking that up?
So let me extend on your idea of being authentically truthful and turn to Kirsten, Dr. Kirsten. Because you have written a lot about scholarly scholarly rearing. And you've also written a lot about different Black women, including Bell Hooks, but amongst other people. And so when we talk about being authentically truthful, and we connect that to this idea of scholarly rearing, where does that get us? What is it?
What is scholarly rearing, actually? So what I think I argue in my work is that scholarly rearing is a Black woman practice, or Black communal and professional practice of being responsible to the next generation of Black women scholars. In a nutshell, how do Black women scholars care for the intellectual and spiritual maturation and development of the next generation of Black women scholars, and that can't be done without authenticity. Trying to make a big line smaller. So what I argue in my work is a lot of times so scholarly rearing happens in multiple spaces and places, and it's also not bound by temporality. So it's not bound by time. So it doesn't have to happen in this immediate interaction. So, for instance, Dr. Dillard has been scholarly rearing me since I was an early doc student. Before she knew me, she may have met me 2 years ago, but a decade ago, she was rearing me because she was writing work that was authentic, that was narrative, that was speaking Black people into existence within an academic discourse that disallowed for Black people, or Black ways of knowing and being in the world. And so when she did that, she gave me permission to be. She was telling me how to be in the world. She was telling me how to be an academic, how to be a scholar. She was validating the intellectual traditions that I learned in my home in New Iberia, Louisiana, on the Gulf Coast, in the Deep South, in the South of the South of Louisiana. She was reminding me that the things that I knew that the Black women teachers in my home community taught me were just as rigorous, just as intellectually sound, just as significant as the scholars that I was supposed to be learning and memorizing as a doc student. And so in those moments, that was a really powerful, her work became really powerful moments of scholarly rearing for me because she brought me into existence, not the version of me that that white academia had in mind. Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna let that sit for just a second. See, many sometimes.
What would they do in the church?
Oh yes.
Let me tell y'all something. I've been stalking Dr. Dillard for over a decade. I could not meet her. I was like trying to find a presentation she was doing at AERA. I was just like, with my notepad, young scholar, just trying to get to know her. And I didn't actually get to meet Dr. Dillard until 2 years ago. Exactly. She did a talk at my university. Thank you, Dr. Dancy, when you was with us. And that was the first time I actually got to physically meet her. But she has had a profound impact on who I am today. Who I am as a scholar today is in large part due to In Dark and Feminist Epistemology, in large part due to Dr. Dillard being not giving a damn. Just not giving a damn.
Okay, I can go home now.
So I'm gonna stop there.
So since we're gonna still give a damn. I am sorry, Dr. Shante. I'm so sorry. She's looking at me like. So we're gonna still give a little bit of a damn as we continue on for right now, Dr. Dillard, with Dr. Venus. So I'm still sitting on everything that you dropped earlier. You said epistemic apartheid. Yeah. You said Black girls and Black women's power as opposed to thinking in the singular about Black feminists. let me just say, and I don't know if I've ever had an opportunity to tell you this, so this is my opportunity. Your edited book is Black Feminism in Education. You have an edited book, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which is a foundational text for me that recently came out in terms of understanding Lauryn Hill generally, but understanding blackness and womanness and girlness more specifically. So all I'm saying is that you are brilliant. And that brilliance for me is connected to all of you on this panel. And it has allowed me to think that I can do whatever I want to do in the world. I've never had an opportunity to tell you that. And I just want to let you know that. And I feel the same way about all of you. Because it is not every day that we have an opportunity to just take in this brilliance of blackness and womanness. And this is what we need to do. And so I'm thinking my question for you is something about this epistemic apartheid. And what is that? But really, what I want to ask you is this. And I've been wanting to ask this for about 10 years now. Do white people have a role in this work?
Really?
It's right there in the middle of stuff.
Just drop that.
What I'm going to do, Dr. Venus, I'm just going to take a seat.
We just gotta make sure my driver is not here, right? This is not live stream. Well, okay, so again, today's meditation, be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you all hear her in the back? No. We need to hear this, Dr. Venus.
She asked if white people have a role in this work. And today's, my meditation for today was to be true to yourself. I'm at a point, Dr. Kinloch, I got Shantae next to me, so I have to watch my mouth. I'm at a point now, I can't let white people take up my head space. I honestly can't. Right now, I'm trying to figure out what role can we play in our own emancipation and liberation. Y'all, because remember, I'm seeing this from different angles. I get to see this as someone who's housed in the College of Education, but I'm also seeing it from the perspective of a clinician. Y'all, it's bad right now. Did I mention too, I'm seeing it as a mother, okay? Maybe not with my own children in certain ways, but there are ways of getting at the psyche. So what role, or if white people have a role, let white people go and figure out their problems, okay? And they have a lot. I cited earlier ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. Now, see, what people don't realize is that for some of us, to Dr. Olga's point, we don't just have to know their stuff, we have to know our stuff. So we actually have an advantage, okay? So imagine that enslaved African she's listening to what's going on in the house, but she's running out to the field or to the black houses, right? And she's also learning how they're existing. And so she's doing this exchange. She's a translator, right? A bicultural translator. And so my point is to say this, okay? With ACEs, I had to study this also from a statistician's perspective. Adverse childhood experiences was actually based off data collected by white middle-class employees by Kaiser Permanente. That means they have money. So everything we're talking about with trauma, white people messed up, y'all. Okay, they got some issues. But they're trying to apply that to our black bodies, to our black kids. So how you going to take assessment that was meant for white people and based off that data and apply it to the young? That's problematic. And if you know anything about the clinical fields, right, we do have an ACEs assessment. We do. But we also have an assessment for trauma, PTSD. They're not the same. They don't always overlap. So you're talking about overgeneralization, right, and a misuse of data. That's what's happening there. If anything, we should be providing interventions to all the adults in the building, not to the youth, especially white adults. Okay, so do look up that data and the questions that were asked in the population. So, about who has a struggle, I'm gonna put this out there because Shantae's muse, other mother, brought her all the way here. Here's our reality. Black girls' incarceration rates have increased.
Yes. Yes.
300%
Yes.
if that's possible. Queer black girls, gender non-conforming girls, they are part of those girls who are being pushed out of school, not only pushed out, but pushed into the criminal injustice system and out into sex work. This is urgent. I don't have time to play. This is stuff that I see in my daily reality. I fight after 4 o'clock when I leave the university, if I've been there at all. Keep in mind, I fight for mothers' rights. I can't even talk about that publicly because that's a legal issue and a clinically protected issue. We still fight for mothers' rights like this is slave times.
Yes.
A slaveocracy. They're taking our babies right in the delivery room. I don't even know if y'all know that. Could you imagine the shock to that baby system and to the mother system? Everything you know about recovery after delivery is between that mother-child connection. I'm like, so, like, because this is something that's so true to me, my breast filling up. You know why? Because I used to breastfeed. It has been a long time, at least 14 years. Okay, and anybody who's had children know what I mean. That happens. But that's, for me, that's a trigger. It's the same thing. Okay, look at now, some recent data came out. Trans women, trans people are just, they're missing. They're being killed on the streets. Yes. We got better rights and protections for dogs than we have for our trans siblings and cousins. That's the reality. I didn't just insert that shit. You're sitting right next to me. Was that not on my list already? Okay, another issue, Shantae. Adults. We have so many black women with so much education. So much education. But yet we have so many black women over the age of 25 who are dealing with hypertension, depression, anxiety through the roof. Because they go into these institutions, into these workplaces, and they tolerate them. So we have to start asking resiliency and success at the price of what?
Yes.
Our sanity. What are we asking people to adapt to? What are we asking our girls and women to adapt to? Economic disenfranchisement. We have a problem. When we have the black family's wealth right now is less than $3,000. For some of y'all, that's y'all play money to go shopping with on your debit cards. Think about that. And that's only economic disenfranchisement is a problem for the black woman for the simple fact that when our brothers are getting locked up and they need to come back home, guess who homes they coming to? When we trying to get up and down these roads to go see them or they need to make a phone call that somebody's making a profit off of, who paying that bill? We take care of our elderly at higher rates. Okay, not in institutions, but in our homes. And research shows that African American women are the biggest providers to civic organizations, our churches, our fraternal organizations, and other civic organizations. So think about that. When you rob us, you rob a whole community. Right now we got 10,000, actually 30-something thousand black girls missing under the age of 17.
Yes.
Shantae, we got a Shantae missing. This is why I wanted her up here, because I know her story. Look at her. She's in 6th grade, by the way, y'all. 6th grade. 6th grade. Hey, research shows suicidal ideation is up amongst our black girls. Not at the age of 12? Not at the age of 12. Not the age of 11. Not 10. The age of 6. I can guarantee you, y'all notice I ain't got my phone up here. You know why I don't have my phone up here? Because I got a little girl texting me right now. I guarantee you that. Telling me how messed up her school day is. Yes, you may.
just to piggyback off of that, because it blew my mind. Just that statistic. Maybe a week ago, my nephew came to me, and he was let go from school. He's in the 4th grade, and he told his teacher that he felt like he wanted to kill himself. And that took me back, Because I'm like, how did you even learn what suicide is? Like, how did that even register in your mind that you know that you could kill yourself?
And it gets worse. That's suicidal ideation. I'm not even talking about self-harm. See, we differentiate between self-harming and suicidal ideation. So we have black girls who are between the ages of 12 and 17 who are constantly thinking about suicide. Or, I mean, it's not self-harming. Self-harming,
Yeah.
okay? And I don't, because I got a kid in the room, I don't want to get into details. But self-harming behaviors, okay? But then that also is women between the ages of 25 and 35, highest than we've ever seen, and also black women elders, over the age of 55. Okay? So this is a crisis. And what we need is, what we need is a different cultural framework. Because some people get caught up thinking, oh, she just so pro-black. You know, that I'm saying, oh, we gonna go kill Whitey. It's not, at this point, it's not about that. It's how do I save Shantae, Shaniqua, and Trayvon.
Right.
That's just our reality. We don't even have time for pontification. It's gotten worse, not better. So do white people have a role? I don't know, because of the urgency of what we're up against. We need to figure out how to equip our young people, our academics across the age spectrum, across the diaspora, with new forms of knowledge, new tools for liberation. And that's going to look different. It's going to be some of these people acting the fool out here in these streets. It's going to be some of us acting the fool up in these classrooms.
Can I add to that?
Please,
So, white people's space to me, the only thing in this movement I think white people should be providing is resources, access, and dismantling the white supremacy that is around them. White women really need to step up to the plate and actually dismantle the white supremacy instead of telling us they're going to do it. Actually go to your white men, call them out, hold them accountable, and stop acting like you're our allies. Like, acting like you're our allies is not getting us anywhere. Because me personally, I don't have time for white people that don't really want to do the work. I've cut off plenty of allies. I don't need allyship. I need to survive.
Co-conspirators.
Right. I don't need that. So if you get out of that frame of thinking as a white person, like, I have to show up for this black person and defend them. I've been fighting all my damn life.
All my life I had to
fight. So it's like, I'm going to still keep fighting. I think in the realm of whiteness, in the realm of privilege, that privilege, that whiteness, that access to resources needs to actually be provided for black and brown people.
I need like a handkerchief or a napkin or something. Like, y'all are in church, and I don't really know. I'm good.
I'm handing out somebody else's tissue.
I do know we're running on time, so I really have to turn it over for some questions from the audience. If you have a question you want to just sort of throw out there, because we're on limited time. Yes.
I just wanted to thank Dr. Venus for having Shantae up there, and whatever she absorbs from scholars today, I praise God for it, because it will be different when she goes to school tomorrow. I just want to say that Shantae's my neighbor. She's a 6th grader at Pittsburgh King. I wanted her to sit among strong black women who care about her education. I wanted her to enjoy lunch instead of eating lunch in a segregated section of her school, because she is leveled by a point system that deems her unfit to congregate with obedient children during lunch. Her dehumanization happens daily in a school designated as CSI by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, but boasts about being a community school. She's leveled the lowest using the color purple, which ironically is a color that is celebrated in our culture. Deculturalization is perpetuated with frequent suspensions and trips to the focus room, which white school staff jokingly refer to as the purgatory. I told her recently, I'm going to put you in Clayton where you belong. And she told me she's on the list. Clayton is an alternative school deemed a soft jail by a former school board director. I'm committed to getting this baby out of the school to bring them back. She's categorized as problematic and critical by a system who refuses to educate her and disenfranchises her entire family by limiting their opportunity to attend higher performing schools in Pittsburgh Public that are reserved for white children, Colfax, and the rest of them. I'm asking for your help today. Anybody's help in this room who can help me, Because Shantae is only one of hundreds of students
Yes.
in my neighborhood.
Yes.
Yes.
I know you said questions, but I need to piggyback on what my cousin said, because I'm an educator in one of the schools that they're trying to possibly send her to. And I'm the only African-American teacher there among several white women and men. And I'm fighting against school to prison pipeline every day, and how special education students are identified, mostly African-American males. Our population of African-American males is 88% in the school. And then we also have African-American women, girls. She is absolutely right, how the system, we work on a level system too. And what is happening is our students are, first of all, positive image for African Americans is not happening in a school where you have predominantly white women and men trying to identify African American students. Secondly, when you have a level system, most of the time it's behavioral based, PBIS based, but we're not doing the same balance of academics and expression. I'm an art teacher. And so it's just appalling. And then when you were talking about resilience and how hypertension and all these different things that we're dealing with, there were so many people in this room that I know for the past year I have been going through so much mental health wise, being the only educator in a space where I feel like I'm powerless and that my kids are being massacred on a daily basis. And I'm here because I'm trying to find a way, and I'm trying to attain the power to dismantle the things that I'm seeing, the atrocities that I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis. And there are people who are, or similar others, who are not standing up for the atrocities that are occurring. And it's a shame.
And it's white women.
It's a shame.
And it's white women as a majority. I want to say in Pittsburgh, as a majority, it is. White women are not doing what they're supposed to do in Pittsburgh. They're not. Because if they were, black, and it hurts me that black women hurt. And when I see that we live in a society that is controlled by whiteness, and nothing's being done, it goes to those with the power, to those with the privilege. And white women need to do their jobs. I've been here all my life. I've seen this stuff recycle. I've seen these panels recycle. I've seen all these things recycle over and over and over from a young kid. The ones with the privilege and the power are not doing their damn jobs. And they want to be in our circles. We give them access to our circles. So what happens when we stop giving access to our circles? What happens then? We create a power of black and brownness. And I always talk, and I don't want to talk too much, but I always talk about building equity for black people. We need to do that in Pittsburgh. We cannot keep depending on massa. We can't. As long as we do that, we're going to still hurt every single day. Every day. So that's what I wanted to add to it.
So this ties in with talking about the education in Pittsburgh. Last semester, I'm a student at Carlo. I participated in the youth media advocacy project, and I was placed at Perry. And that was a fish out of the water for me. None of the students were white, none that I worked with. And they come into the class, they're coming from lunch. A lot of them don't eat. The food is awful, so now they're hungry, and then they eat candy. And the other students in the BIMAP class, we would compare notes, and we discovered that there's the inequity within the Pittsburgh Public Schools. Perry has no resources. They have half a desk. They can't even open their notebook. They carry around a pencil. They don't take their books home. The books stay in the classroom. They have no computers. students at other schools, they have laptops in the classroom. I'm like, what are you talking about? And this is the same school district. We hear about inequity between school districts. So I just happened to meet the school board member, Veronica, at Carlo in September when it was alumni weekend. And I put the question to her, why are these schools not equal? And she said, well, you know, the students can choose to go to whichever school they want. And I'm sitting there like, how can you say that? Because I know they don't have the resources. They can't ride a bus for 2 hours to go across town to attend a better school, and they probably can't even get into it.
And that's what I'm saying. So you have people like Shantae who she's resisting. If you know anything about trauma and how people resist trauma, she's resisting. And so we need to think about, even before we leave here, how are we going to reward her for being a freedom fighter? Are we going to continue to allow the structures and individuals to harm her and to push her out of school, right? And we all, it's at least 100 of us in here now. How are we now going to protect her? That's all I'm saying, y'all. We see somebody who's in prison for fighting back.
Yes.
Okay,
hi everyone. I'm Dr. Nyango Kivuba, School of Education, University of Pittsburgh, 2006. Thank you, Pete. Pete brought me to the United States, and I've raised my 3 children here. And of course, you all know I'm not raising them as just Kenyans, I'm raising them as black kids too, which is a reality that I didn't know about where I come from, because my president is black, the assistant president is black, the minister of education is black, all these things. So I am trying my best, or I tried my best with my 3 children who are now 19, 22, and 26. Now, recently, I visited my daughter at upstate New York at a school called Bard, B-A-R-D. That's where she goes to college. And she does after-school programs there. So she told me, Mama, this is what happened when I went to school, after-school program. This one black girl came to me, and when I said I will be the one who will lead the program tonight, she was so happy, and she clung to me because I was the role model she had ever seen in the school at that capacity. And because she wanted to spend more time with me, she was punished for it severely. So I said, I'm not coming to this school again if you can punish that girl because of, you know, spending time with me or being close to me because I look like her. So I told her, you know, you did what you saw was right for you, but I want to bring this conversation here so that I can continue it with my daughter in a more informed way when she comes for Thanksgiving, so that I know that when she faces such a thing again, she may have a better way of working with this, because I'm thinking if she left that girl, there is still a gap in that girl's mind.
Absolutely.
And she's only 19, but she saw the wrong in that. So she played her part the best way she could. So could you please, any panelist or anyone, respond to that?
I want to use a term that I heard at a lecture at AERA this past year from Cynthia Fordham, and that is called lured and loathed. We are lured into spaces, predominantly white spaces, and told that we are in fact there to affect change, but in change there is loss. And part of the loss is the privilege. Part of the loss is the dominance. So one of the ways that you teach your daughter to handle that situation is to understand that everyone who wants her in does not want her to succeed.
Right.
All right. That's where the loathing comes in. And the loathing becomes, you are not as good as.
Right.
So, and there are subtle messages about that, and there are overt messages, and she needs to be able to parse so she knows. I would also commend to you the work that was done in the 1950s by Goldman. The book is called Stigma. And what happens with stigma is the stigmatized group is expected to make the group who stigmatizes feel comfortable.
Yep.
So if in fact I'm blind and I'm with sighted people, then it becomes my obligation as the blind person to make the sighted people feel comfortable about my blindness when they make gaffes. Similarly, blacks are placed in the same situation. We're placed in that same, and there are other persons of color who could speak to that as well, and in a different way. The point I'm trying to make here is understand your context. You are both lured for various and sundry reasons. You are even given titles, and we could get into that about how they wanted to have your integrity, because if they have your integrity, they have your soul, and they got you. And the second thing is that you're loathed at the same time, because you still represent the exotic other. And so we want to know all about you. How do you do what you do? How do you be how you be? We just want to understand, because we are all in this together. Let me say this in ending. Individual agendas, enlightened self-interest trumps, no pun intended, everything. Okay? Remember who you are, where you are, and whose you are.
I think we have time for one more.
I want to thank you guys so much for having this panel, and to let everyone else know in the room, I am a first-year doctoral student in Pitt's English Department for Rhetoric.
English?
English, I know, I'm sorry. I knew as soon as I said it.
We're going to talk after
I know, we're going to talk. Shout out to D Black, shout out to Dr. Scott. But I brought out this book called Push Out by Monique Morris. I went to the Justice for Black Girls conference about 2 weeks ago in Harlem. And something as a call out that I want to reach to other educators, as well as a question that I have for everyone on this panel, is that when I was 19 or 20, I started a movement called Change Rape Culture on my campus at the University of Texas at San Antonio as the homecoming queen and as a black woman. Similar to what everyone else was saying, regardless of what the theories say, I am always going to be put in a hole. My body, regardless of what I have on, regardless of what the words are coming out of my mouth, I'm going to be attacked, regardless. And that is exactly what that movement was about. We put the foot to the pavement and got everyone in Title IX fired. And when I pulled up here to Pitt, I said I'm about to do the same goddamn thing. Today, I sent a 3-page email to all of my white counterparts in our English course, because we are teaching black children and they are ruining it. They are traumatizing these children. 12 black babies walked into that room and not a single one of them said hello. Said hello, how are you? You're beautiful, you're here for a reason. And what I'm not here to do is play with the bullshit. That is not what I'm here to do. 5 years, I'm not going to waste my time. You can guarantee that. So when I sent that email today and I came here to this talk, it all seemed very serendipitous, because I have been asking myself, what am I willing to allow white people to read of my life? I close myself every time I walk into a classroom to this day. This is trauma that I'm still living. These are things that I'm still afraid to say. These are things that I'm still afraid to do. And I can't write them on a piece of paper and have a white woman tell me that I'm wrong or that she doesn't understand what the fuck I'm saying. So instead, when I was 20, I was tasked with this mission. I'm not necessarily religious, but I was told to open a school for black girls with just black women in it. With black women who were helping other black women to reach their potential, without us using them as experiments and waiting for the world to get their shit together before we can get white women, black women, the power that they need. We're talking about love, we're talking about all these things, but black women need power at the end of the day. Power and money. I can send you my Cash App. So what I'm asking for these panelists, what I'm asking of everyone in the room, is that I'm trying to change what my project is on, is to center in healing.
Yes.
I think the one thing that women have told and told again, I had a project yesterday in my class, in Dr. Chandra Meyer's class, and we had to make a broadside printing press. And one of the main documents that got me through a time when my best friend was being raped by the man that I was having sex with was that I will never know the thousands of names unknown. There have been thousands of black women activists before us, Sojourner Truth, Frances Harper, but to the thousands upon thousands unknown, to the thousands who we will never know, that is who my school is for. Yeah. That is whoever will be my school is for. Yeah. So when creating curriculum centered in healing, when creating a space centered for Black women, centered specifically in healing, can you give me a direction in which I can take it? But please understand that I will not fuck this up. I promise you I won't. And these white people, we are going to disrupt. We're going to act a goddamn fool. We're going to do all of it. But thank you so much for this talk. It was such a good timing. Thank you.
Can I respond to this real quick? Thank you. Part of what I so appreciate your words, and the sister behind you as well, because part of, we're asking for a couple of things. One is you are saying, I mean out loud and in public, in this space, in front of all of us, that you have made a covenant with the ancestors. A covenant. That's a holy space, people.
I'm sorry, it's above me.
Yeah, it's a covenant that you've made with the ancestors to make sure that a next generation of kids
and I'm
are not.
protected to make sure that that is going to happen.
So they already are working with you to figure this out. You don't have to worry about that part. But part of what a covenant requires is repair. We often forget that. We think a covenant is just a promise that we have with the ancestors. No, it's about repair. And so part of what you're also going to have to sort of think about are these questions of help for yourself. What are the spaces where you are going to be well enough to be able to do the work that you're asking to do in a space that does not want you to do it? Even if we move ourselves outside of these intellectual spaces, those streets out there ain't trying to listen to this either. What is the repair that's going to be necessary? I'm kind of with you. I'm sort of done with white people. And it's not that I don't like you. It's that in the work that's being required right now, aside from the resources, you can't help me. Because first of all, you're not well. And if you've ever been in the dungeons in Ghana and other places, you will recognize how it is that white people can't be well. There is atonement for generations that must be accounted for. And it shows up every day in your behaviors. I would suggest that if there's something that white people can be doing, it's about figuring out what the hell happened. And what is your responsibility in it? And then how do you make sure it never happens again? So yeah, sis, I'm excited about your project, but get out of your way, get out of the way.
Yes.
The ancestors have already ordained this if it's come to you. But don't forget that the repair is also necessary in addition to the promise.
We have 20 seconds.
I just had one question. It's a very important, it's not a very important, but it is a question. I want to know where the Pitt administrators are.
One standing right in the room.
Well, wait a minute. No, I'm not talking about this administration. I'm talking about, look, higher education is the most resistant system to change. Okay? I mean, we continue to replicate the same idiocies. And if we're not careful, we are no longer going to exist broadly, because people can go other places for information. So my question, and I'm not asking for an answer, but I'm throwing it out. This is a kind of conversation that's happening in multiple places across multiple groups, where I should be seeing representation from the university in more than a token fashion to listen, to learn, to engage. I asked that question. I should be seeing vice presidents. I should be seeing presidents. I understand scheduling conflicts. I should be seeing representation from the university. If you care so deeply, if you're saying it to anybody who will listen, including the foundations in Pittsburgh, then show it by your actions, by admitting what you don't know, and by joining alliances broadly, both within the university and external to it, to show your commitment to not short-term, long-term, systemic change. That's all I had to say. That's all. That's all. That's all I had to say.
So before we run out, I want to try to bring it together, which I know is impossible to do, but this is what I've heard in my sort of like going back to June Jordan and my love of her and poetry. This is my found poem from some of the things that I heard. So, standing in the way, know me by my work, not just by what you want to call me, my name. Black feminism's most rigorous analytic of power. Can white people ground their lives and work in Black feminisms for liberation? Being in spaces of sisterhood, toxic femininity, the way of being in the world, stolen and recycled. Can you join me in calling the names out? Dr. Olga, Dr. Cynthia, Dr. Kirsten, Dr. Venus, Dr. Shante, Dr. Ciora. Resisting trauma, Blackness, Black representation, feminism from a white woman dominant lens needs to be exploded. Black girl power, Black woman power, epistemic apartheid, raising up names, being on the front porch and talking, playing school. Black feminism as a philosophical and epistemological way of being and living and existing. Black girls' incarceration rates have increased. I don't have time to play. We were activists before the term activists. Fighting for mothers' rights. What are our histories? Existing within predominantly white spaces, our life stories, slavocracy, conundrum, wrapped. Learning the history of institutions, don't interact well with everybody. Listen to people on the streets. My duty is to teach against colonial binary labels, names, create spaces intentionally for Black trans kids to live. They were not provided space. Are we providing space? Even by Black people. Are we doing this work? Do white people have a role? I don't know. Dismantle white supremacy. Let white women do their jobs and not ours. Stop acting like allies, because you ain't. Being authentically truthful. The suicidal rate, beginning at the age of 6, out of this world. Living here was always combative. Having and unpacking conversation. Being in spaces of we. We aren't taking care of us. White supremacy has kept education away from Black people and Black spaces. Being leveled by a points system. How do you know that you don't want to kill yourself? How do you know that you do? I've been fighting all my damn life. Make yourself accountable. When you rob us, you rob our entire communities. You have better rights for dogs than for Black girls and Black women. Getting this baby out of the school to prison pipeline. Shantae is but one, going through so much, trying to find a way that stand against atrocities. Everyone who wants you in doesn't want you to succeed. Stigma, trauma, healing, recovery, repair, being healed, being well, self-well, figuring out what the hell happened, centering in and on healing, doing this work, building equity for Black people, and not wanting to be us, but wanting to be in our circles. These are your words. This is the power of Black woman and girlness. This is the power of Blackness. And I'm just going to say, this is the first of many conversations that need to lead into action. So as we walk out, I want you to hold on to their words. I want you to look at Ms. Shantae. I want you to understand that this work is urgent. And if we are only talking it, we are not doing it, and we're not changing the world. So we need to change the world by becoming committed to the work and doing the work and understanding that if we are not doing it, we cannot trust that Shantae is going to be well because we might not be well. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.